Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report on the Real News Network. Myself, along with my reporting partner, Stephen Janis, have continued to document not just how corrupt American policing is, but also how that corruption is fueled by systemic resistance to any sort of real civilian oversight or reform. Last week, we looked at this issue in the context of the death of Anton Black. Anton was a 19-year-old high school track star who was chased by police, tasered, and then died during the arrest. Body cam footage shows Anton under physical duress, but the state medical examiner's office ruled his death an accident. However, a medical expert we consulted said he died from positional asphyxiation. Still, prosecutors say the officers will not face charges, a fact that has left another Black family to mourn without justice.
There's an agenda. There's something not right. They're running at him like they're trying to get to him, like they're going to tackle him or something. He dodges them and goes home. They chase him to his house and they kill him there. Come on now, you can sugarcoat it all you want. You can change the video all you want. You can change the cam all you want. You can narrate it. You can do whatever you want. But you choked him to death.
But this week, we're going to focus on a case of deep-rooted corruption and how the city of Baltimore is trying to shirk responsibility for it. It's a case that raises even more questions about how above the law American police are. The scandal I'm talking about is the behavior of the Gun Trace Task Force.
The 7 defendants were members of the Gun Trace Task Force of the Baltimore City Police Department, and during the course of their membership in that task force, they conspired to engage in a racketeering conspiracy. The crimes included robbery of victims, overtime fraud, filing of false police reports, and a variety of other illegal activities.
The members of this elite unit wreaked havoc on the city for years, all with the knowledge of their superiors and with the unquestioned support of city leaders. The fallout from this scandal has been devastating for city residents. Currently, prosecutors are reviewing over 300 cases that may be tainted by the GTTF. Hundreds of residents were robbed of their rent money and their freedom. But now the city is saying it's not responsible for the actions of the GTTF. That's right, you heard it correctly. The city that gave them badges, guns, and a license to rob and terrorize residents should be held harmless, all because of an obscure legal theory that the officers were acting outside the scope of their official duties.
He's come out and made the statement in terms of the officers who were convicted in terms of the Gun Trace Task Force, that he's not going to pay on the basis that they were out of the scope of their employment before he even dealt with the facts of all the people that have been injured, maimed, jailed, lost careers, lost livelihoods. He just came out and blanketly said he's not going to compensate.
It's a shirking of responsibility that is difficult to fathom, and another damning piece of evidence on just how untouchable American police are. So, Stephen, can you give us an example of how bad the GTTF scandal was, especially in relation to the troubled history of the Baltimore City Police Department?
Well, one thing that we have talked about a lot as we've reported about policing is the fact that people would tell me when I was a reporter 10 years ago or 12 years ago that police were taking money from them and robbing them, basically. And when I used to go to city officials and say, I've got this story about a cop who took $10,000, or really more, it was more like $900, $800, they would say, oh, they're just drug dealers. Right. But now we learn in this scandal that for years, and we're talking about 10 years, these police officers were robbing people, taking drugs and selling drugs, which is another thing that the community had always said, that police were more involved in the drug game than drug dealers were. And it turns out they were right, because throughout the trials, we learned that these officers, I don't know why we call them officers anymore, these people, these criminals were taking drugs and selling them. Pounds of marijuana, hundreds of pills, and even it was so bad that during the uprising in 2015, Police Commissioner Anthony Batts had blamed the violence that happened after it on on stolen pills, like oxycodone from pharmacies, that was turned and dealt on the street. Well, it turns out that the officers in this group had actually taken that Oxycontin, given it to a bail bondsman, and dealt it. So it sort of confirmed what people in the community have been saying. Exactly. I think what makes it that much worse is that it was ignored.
Which brings us to our guest who has firsthand experience with the Gun Trace Task Force and understands the impact of the city's troubling legal position. His name is Ivan Potts, and he was arrested by 3 members of the GTTF several years ago. Potts says they planted a gun on him, and he was convicted based upon their testimony, and a judge sentenced him to 8 years in prison. But then sitting in his jail cell on March of 2017, he saw something on TV that would change his life, and I'll let him pick up the story from there. So, Ivan, you were sitting in your prison cell with your cellmate watching TV, and you saw something amazing on the screen.
Yep, seeing the same pictures right here pop on the screen.
Right. And so what was that newscast about? When you saw those pictures on the screen, what did you realize?
First I seen, I actually was like shocked for real, but I seen their face flash across the screen. It was like they was indicted by the federal government, and they've been setting people up, so I just felt like relief. So my story was finally, like, I really didn't have to tell my story now.
Right. So when you realized that those officers were actually criminals, that what you said was true, hey, they planted this gun on me and they've done it to other people, what did you start doing? I mean, did you have a lawyer at that time, or did you have to be your own lawyer? Yeah,
I was my own lawyer at the time. I had a book. I went to the legal law library, and I got a book on how to file lawsuits and how to basically file for called habeas corpus,
right,
and file a habeas corpus for immediate release. And I filed all my paperwork myself.
Now, part of the reason why we brought you here is because we want to talk about how difficult it is for people to get justice. Now, you have filed a lawsuit because of the actions of these Gun Trace Task Force officers.
Right.
So how is this lawsuit going, and what kind of obstacles are you facing?
I mean, I'm facing great obstacles. Like, it's not like they just want to give me money.
Right.
You know, even though I did time, it's like they don't want to give me money.
Right.
And it's becoming a problem because it's like, okay, like, what did I do wrong? Like, am I in the wrong? What am I wrong for, you know? Like, they just admitted to their guilt, and I told you the story already. So it's like, who's accountable? Who's going to be held accountable for this?
Right.
And right now, it's like they just ducking their they're ducking their responsibility. So it's a battle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Stephen, we've done some reporting that shows that Ivan's case actually isn't the exception. And you spoke with lawyer Dwight A. Pettit, who, full disclosure, is actually a member of our board.
Right.
And he's talking about some of the obstacles he faces when he tries to get reparations for his clients.
Yeah, this seems to be a policy that has evolved quite recently in the city to fight every type of lawsuit brought in terms of police brutality.
Yes.
Dwight Pettit has been litigating cases for years in which the city keeps appealing them on small technicalities, even though the facts aren't disputed, and refuses to pay. The new city solicitor, Andre Davis, who is a former federal judge in the Fourth Circuit, has said publicly that the city will not be held responsible for the actions of the officers of the Gun Trace Task Force because they're, like we said before, outside the scope of their duties, which is really kind of absurd. I mean, the city was paying their salary. The city gave them badges and guns. And as we learned in the trials of 2 of the officers in that task force, that city officials, like the top police officials, knew what they were doing and were rewarding them.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the things we learned in the trial was that the police commissioner said to Sergeant Wayne Jenkins, who is the sort of leader of the whole squad, you know, what are you doing to keep people motivated? And he said, giving them, you know, overtime for getting a gun.
Slash
and he
time,
said, good.
slash days.
Well, called slash days, right, which basically is some sort of phenomena invented by the Baltimore City Police Department where if you get a gun, you get a day off. Not legal,
right,
but nevertheless they did it. And he was saying, yeah, we're giving them slash days, and Commissioner Davis, Kevin Davis at that point, said, good work. So people knew what they were doing. Everybody knew. Everybody knew and everybody supported, and it was exactly the type of policing that the city has espoused for decades. You know, it was a sort of a reiteration of the sort of infamous VSED unit, which
right,
is the Violent Impacts Crime Division, which was the subject of a Baltimore Sun story, you know, about millions of dollars, $5 million in settlements for police brutality. They were exceptionally brutal. And a lot of that policing was just transferred into the Gun Trace Task Force. And so the police, the city not just embraced it, but celebrated it and said, this is how we're going to solve crime. So it's really a bunch of legal BS that they would come to this sort of term or idea that they're not responsible. And I think for people like well, go ahead. Yeah.
It's like it's like this when a person tell me, that's just like me. If I'm responsible for something, I'm responsible for it. That's just what it is. That's like the standards of America.
Right.
Accountability.
Exactly.
You know, like, so for Baltimore officials to say they're not responsible, they basically going against everything America stands for. Because, you know, even prisoners, when you get convicted of a crime, and if you fail, it's the justice system. If you're found guilty, it's a system you go through. You get found guilty, you receive your time, you go to prison. You know. So what happens when government officials are wrong?
Right.
Nothing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
great question.
it's like, oh, now you bending the rules now, huh?
Exactly.
Now, oh, it doesn't apply to you, but it applies to them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I also wanted to ask you about what kind of impact
And even
that this has had on you.
Not to cut you off. Even the officers, they in prison.
Right.
I don't have no problem with them. They have been forgiven. They doing their time. So where are their boss at? You know what I mean?
Right.
That is a great question.
And it's like, damn, like y'all. So they was just pawns.
That's a really good point.
In a
That's a really
sense,
good
because
point.
now they family lives are fucked up.
Well, one thing I makes
You know
clear
what I mean?
is that policing is a political instrument, right? And it rarely gets to the top, and this is a great point. These were political decisions. I mean, if the mayor doesn't want this to happen, if Mayor O'Malley, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, and you know, didn't want this kind of policing, it wouldn't happen. I'm just telling you right now, as a person who's covered City Hall for over a decade, it wouldn't happen. And so that makes a great point. Why aren't they responsible, especially given the Justice Department report?
And not only that, right? Like, because I got big respect for Marilyn Mosby, because she apologized, you know what I mean?
Right. She took ownership of it.
She took ownership. That's accountability in a sense, you know what I mean? But where's the mayor at?
Great question.
Like,
It's a really good
I
question.
mean, she's just, you know, she's in the judicial system, Marilyn Mosby. But where's the mayor?
Right.
You know, and then I'd be like, they always say they trying to increase violence. I mean, decrease violence in the city. But you release people like me, and you know what I mean. Suppose I wasn't sane, or imagine the people they release in these conditions. They come out with rage. What if they don't have no family?
Right.
What if they don't have no friends, nowhere to turn to? What else they gonna do?
Right. And
Because
especially
they don't even give you $50 when you leave out because you wasn't convicted. I gave my time back. So once you get your time back, it's like they just spit you back out the system. They don't even give you no money.
So you have no support, no resources. You're completely on your own.
You just on your own. Wow. So it's like, I hear what the mayor be saying, and they be like, that's BS, because I'm affected by your system that you representing right now. And I haven't got to apologize, a letter, or, hey, check out some jobs over here, or I got some resources that maybe can help you. Nothing.
No one's reached out to you?
No.
No.
Marilyn Mosby.
Okay.
You know, I met her, we apologized, took a picture.
Right.
You know, it was smooth. But at the end of the day, Marilyn Mosby's not the mayor.
Right.
You
There's
know?
only so much she can
do.
do.
And the mayor is the representative of this city.
And she's supposed to be able to make decisions about the police department.
Exactly.
Right? About the direction of it. You know, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how that arrest and imprisonment impacted your life. When the GTTF disrupted your life like they did, basically stole 2.5 years of your life, how has that impacted you, and how is that impacting you moving forward? I
mean, it impacted me a lot. And now that I'm home, I see how it impacted me, because like it impacted my relationships with people. Like, I'm still in a constant battle to get my daughter, be in my daughter's life. As far as my music, like I lost hella songs, because where I was living at, once I got locked up, you know, people came moving my stuff around. I had to purchase a bunch of clothes and stuff, tennis. So like, it just set me back. It was a setback, you know? It ain't nothing I just dwell on. You know, I don't even think about it like the things I lost no more. Because it's like if I continue to think about it, I get frustrated, mad. I just focus on working now. I just want them to, you know, own up.
Right.
That's it. Own up. And that's it, because if anything, I want to contribute to my city than destroy it. So I don't understand, like, why Baltimore don't want to make their citizens wealthier, or, you know,
and
put some money in your pocket,
productive, right?
put you on the right track. Maybe I could better my community with the money I get, you know, things like that. But in the city, it's like, no, we don't want to give it to you. Just let him go out in America, and he's all right. You're free.
So let's be clear. We have a city that adopted very aggressive policing in poor communities of color, and they did this with so-called specialized units, military-style cops, who Ivan has pointed out before, don't even wear uniforms. And far from distancing themselves from the officers' actions, Stephen, you have firsthand experience with how the city actually touted their achievements.
Yeah, you know, what I was thinking after I talked to Ivan the first time when he just got out, one thing I was thinking about was that as reporters, we get media updates from the police department almost daily. And almost every couple of days, I get an email that said, police confiscated a gun. This was when the gun trace task force was actually operation. And it was something, you know, they don't send out emails for making arrests for burglaries. They don't send out emails for even making arrests for shootings. But they would send these emails out, so-and-so confiscated a gun, you know, and it was the gun trace task force. And they would send it out as being the exemplar, the most important thing in their crime-fighting strategy. We've got a gun, you know, and those emails were constant. And so it really shows that they felt like the gun trace task force was the best thing they had going. I mean, and that gets back to Ivan's point. Like, they embrace this. And promote it. And
it's like they promoting, all right, because this how you got it. They promoting violence, because without violence, they can't get their fame.
Right.
But we're not doing nothing. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, it's like stir the water to catch the fish. So you let me out of jail. You tell me I'm not responsible for what happened to you.
Right.
They tell you we did it. I mean, they copped out. They admitted their guilt during their time.
Right.
So now it's just like, you just leave me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In grief and pain, and
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And you suffered a lot of economic damage too.
Right. Economically depressed and oppressed. You know what I mean? So it's like,
and one thing you said is
I'm cool though, because I'm in good spirits. I'm a firm believer in God. I'm good. You know what I mean? But I want everybody to see how they look.
There were people that, when you got arrested by gun trace task force, who said the same thing as you did, right? That I remember you talking about that. Who said they had a gun planted on them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a million stories. It's a story that you can write a book about this.
Right. So probably thousands of lives that have been impacted.
And some people probably still sitting like, damn, like I remember they got me. And the powers that be just like, they sit in their seat and they ignore it.
One point that should be made, that despite years of this aggressive military style of policing, crime has continued to rise in Baltimore to historic levels. Ivan, as someone who's witnessed this kind of policing firsthand, why do you think crime continues to increase, even though we have this really aggressive police department?
Because there's no resources. For one, like if you ride through the city of Baltimore, it's just vacant houses everywhere.
Right.
Like so many vacant houses, and the neighborhoods just look ran down. The streets, potholes everywhere. Right. And I mean, you go downtown, it's cool, but that's just for tourist attractions. And
that's a very good point.
And every city is like that. But within the inner city, West and East Baltimore, it's just broken.
And that's where the most aggressive policing is, right?
Yeah, and that's where the most aggressive policing, that's where they target.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, why is it like this? Because most of the people that live in these communities are low income.
Beneficiaries of government.
Beneficiaries of the government, you know, and it's drug infested, you know, and you don't have, and the main thing, no businesses is owned by citizens of Baltimore.
By the people who actually live in those communities.
Right. That's the main problem right now.
Stephen, let me ask you the same question. Why do you think crime continues to rise, even though we have this really military-style police department?
One thing that, you know, Ivan is saying, look at Ivan's case. You know, he was a person who was, you know, moving forward with his life, and his life was disruptive. And how can you measure that? He's just one of hundreds, if not thousands, that the Justice Department report documented. So if you have an already very fragile economic system, and you bring in this kind of policing that sort of monetizes the destruction that it wreaks on these communities, you're going to have You're going to make the conditions worse, like poverty, that tend to foment crime. That's exactly what the problem is. Instead of bringing resources in to build communities, you're actually destroying it. And I think that's what this policing has done.
Poverty, ignorance, and oppression. Like, they go hand in hand. You know what I mean? And me, I'm just like that ball that popped out that lottery machine. You know what I mean? You know how you see all the balls in the machine, then one pop out, and then you hear this story, and you're like, oh, yeah. But no, it's in that machine, it's a million balls that's just like me.
Right.
They've been through the same stuff I've been through.
Right.
I was just reluctantly to pop out, and I've been telling y'all what was going on. So it's like, oh, he did say this.
Yeah, and you were one of the people who were lucky enough to
he even filed the case before this came. He said this before they even said something about this.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why I take pride in speaking for the people, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people out here that they're in a worse situation than me.
One recent development that is another example of the political power policing is that our state's attorney, Marilyn Mosby, is facing obstacles in vacating convictions based on the GTTF testimony. Recently, she has asked for the state legislature to pass a law that would make it easier for her to do so. But it's what's stopping her that's even more intriguing, the city judges. So, Stephen, could you elaborate a little bit on what's happening with the city judges and why it's so important?
Well, in cases like Ivan, what happened was the state's attorney reviewed the case and went to a judge and said, can we get a new trial? And the judge will grant a new trial because he'd already been convicted based upon the testimony of these criminals. And so then when the judge grants a new trial, then the prosecutor can drop the case. Because a prosecutor can only drop a case when it is, before it becomes adjudicated. When it's adjudicated, it's too late. They have to either appeal it up the system and reverse it, or get the judge to grant a new trial. And so the judges, just recently, Marilyn Mosby went public and said, look, there are cases we want to vacate. However, the judge doesn't want to grant us a new trial, or for whatever reason. And so she's asked for a change in the law so that she can fix that. But only if the judge did not grant Ivan a new trial, he might still be in jail.
But how can a judge trust anything from the gun trace task force?
That's what Marilyn Mosby is trying to point out. It doesn't matter. Yeah, the cases are tainted. Right. They're liars. They're criminals. They're thieves. But it shows you the power of law enforcement in a city like Baltimore. These guys, they're probably judges who are just like, well, I don't care. And that must be what it is. I mean, I can't read their minds. Judges don't speak publicly. But that must be what it is. And they don't care if these guys are liars, thieves, or whatever, or criminals. They just want to keep people in jail.
And it's important to note that recently Mosby said she will not prosecute marijuana cases. Mosby said that the law is applied disproportionately to African Americans. But no surprise here, Baltimore Police Commissioner said he would continue to make arrests. And I think it's fair to say that when it comes to black people, America's criminal justice system is quick to judge, but slow to forgive. So first, let me ask you, Stephen, how have you seen this play out? The idea that people are quick to judge black people, but very slow to forgive them. Well,
you could look at zero tolerance, where we arrested 100,000 people a year, 90% African American. Never has there been any sort of, as I said, reconciliation with this idea. Never. I saw it in the case of Gerard Mungo, a 7-year-old kid arrested. And when I wrote the story, I would get hate mail from people saying he's just a criminal in the making. It is within the psyche of this country to criminalize African Americans as quickly as possible.
And to not presume that they're innocent at all.
Yeah.
But when you talked about entrepreneurship, I wanted to ask you, because in a way, you're starting your own business. One of the ways I think that you're kind of processing the pain that you experience with your false imprisonment is through music. And I feel like that's sort of your therapy and your business.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about your music career.
Certified Society Entertainment. I basically, like, all the pain and stuff I've been through in my life is why I say I'm certified. Like, when I tell you about something, it's because
you've been through it.
Either I've been through it or my homeboy been through it, we seen it. I might not have been through it firsthand, but I might have witnessed it, So, it's just a representation of me and where I come from, the society I grew up in. And I just, like you said, I channeled a lot of my anger, frustration, pain into my music.
As we sign off, we're going to continue to listen to Ivan's work. Ivan, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and of course my reporting partner, Stephen Janis. We are going to continue to do reporting to hold police accountable. I'm your host, Tay Graham, and I want to thank you for joining me on the Real News Network.
Big white free McMills. Don't forget you need more powerful black men out here that lockdown in the cell, I was all alone. Sending prayers up to God to help me make it home. Cause it was me against some devils, had to hold my own. They tried to crucify the king and knock me off the throne. I can't believe they found me guilty when I went to trial. I can't believe they found me guilty when I went to trial. I can't believe they found me guilty when I went to trial. I looked at my mama and I ain't see a smile. March 2nd, 2016, I was standing in front of them devils.